Hey, what's up, guys? This is Dylan, and welcome back to another episode of a podcast for production assistants. In this episode, I will primarily focus on commercial production and the interaction between agency and the client. I used to work in film and television. My primary focus for the last 6 months has been commercial, since it seems to be the most prominent in Central Florida. I wanted to go more in depth about how working with clients and agency affects the shoot and how it can change the way the job is structured. Essentially, the client is the one paying for the shoot to happen, so it's important to stay in constant communication with the client or agency to make sure you're achieving the look that they want. In this episode, I will be covering some positions that you may have never heard about in film school and how they're critical on a commercial specifically. You'd be surprised by how many people need to watch the monitor or hear the audio track, and it can present unique problems, which even affects your responsibilities as a PA. But before I go into any of that, I just want to outline a few key terms that you'll hear me talk about throughout this podcast. The first one being crafty, also known as craft service or the snack table. This is not to be confused with catering, because catering is lunch or dinner or breakfast specifically. But crafty is more like snacks and drinks and stuff like that. Sometimes you will have a person dedicated to crafty, but most of the time it's dedicated to production. So PAs will be responsible for making sure it's well kept and clean and stocked and everything like that. Another thing you'll hear me talk about is what's called Video Village. Video Village is where they set up the monitor, where they look at the shot, where they hear it if they usually wear headphones with something called IFBs. And these are the transmitters that they can hear the audio track as it's happening in the microphones. But in commercial specifically, there's actually two Video Villages usually. There's the client / agency one. That's usually the bigger one. That's usually the tent with like chairs and like a cooler nearby and everything. They might have like Wi-Fi. And then there's the director's monitor. The director is usually closer to set, so that way he can redirect talent or whatever he needs to do. And they might also have a dedicated monitor for the first AC as well. First assistant camera, which is responsible for pulling focus on the camera. So he might have his own monitor as well. But the one you need to be worried about the most is probably the client and agency monitor. Now, one position I wanted to mention that is kind of specific to commercial is VTR. VTR is responsible for video playback. So when they roll, they want a quick way to refer back to clips, so that way clients can review the footage and be able to see essentially what they shot. With most cinema camera rigs, it's not a quick process, so it helps to have a dedicated person kind of controlling that from a computer. They are also responsible for the monitors that the client sees and the director sees. Usually the first AC is specific to the camera package, and that's a little bit different. But VTR is a very necessary position for commercial specifically because it relies so much on the client and the agency seeing it. Now, you hear me differentiate agency versus client. They're two very separate things. The client is essentially the representative of the brand. So that's the representative from Hershey's chocolate, for example. Now, that's the person that is essentially we're creating the commercial for. But agency is responsible for hiring the production company. It's basically 3 tiers. It's the client, then there's the agency, which is actually concepting and creating this commercial spot, like creatively. And then there's the production company, which actually is hired to shoot it and produce it. So they're 3 very different things, but you'll hear me differentiate client versus agency. And it's just important to know that sometimes. So now that we got those key terms out of the way, I will jump back into what I had before. Now, I'm going to assume that you have a basic understanding of a crew in general, but sometimes it's a little bit confusing in commercials specifically about where the line falls between crew and like producers, because producers can come from different places. For example, they could be producers from the agency, or they could be the producers from production. So the hierarchy kind of for production starts at being the line producer, which hires the production manager, and then the line producer kind of invests their authority into the production manager, and then from there she kind of delegates the crew. So under production department, it goes line producer, production manager, production coordinator, and then production assistants, which is PAs. Common abbreviations are PC for production coordinator and PM for production manager, and then LP, but you don't hear that one as much. It's usually just line producer. Then there are other departments like art department, which has the production designer, and then art director, prop master, and then prop assist. Then you have camera, which the director of photography is responsible for the overall look of the project. And then he is over camera and lighting. So lighting would be the gaffer and the key grip, and then all the grips, and then all the electricians. And then you have camera, which usually the director of photography operates a camera. But if they're not an operate sort of DP, then they'll have an operator. And then you have the ACs, assisting camera. So you have the first AC, which is responsible for the entire camera department and, assembling all the camera, doing all the camera prep. And then they also pull focus on the shots. The second AC reports directly to the first AC. And then they kind of do more of the running for camera, like running batteries to the camera cart, or slating, which is the marker that you put in front of the camera. Everybody knows the slate. You slap it, you say C1, take one, mark, and you hit it. And it's super easy. And then back in the old film days, they had a position called the loader, but we don't really shoot on film anymore, especially for commercial. So it's kind of a thing of the past, but that used to be camera as well. Then there is sound, which is very important. The sound mixer is essentially the one responsible for the entire mix and the entire audio track. A lot of commercials are shot very montage, so sometimes they might not even have sound at all. Other times, if there's dialogue, I won't even say some. I'll say a few commercials some might not shoot or roll sound. But sometimes they don't, which is cool and nice, because then you can call out actions on the take and you don't have to worry about being quiet or anything like that. So it's nice. But most have synced sound. And then you have like the boom operator, which is holding the boom mic. And then, that's pretty much it for audio usually. So some of this I'm going to assume you already know since you already work in film. But there are some key positions which might not be so obvious as others. Most commercials have AD departments, which stands for assistant director. First assistant director is responsible for the overall set operation and logistics and scheduling primarily. They work with the director to create the shoot schedule. And they kind of just make sure everybody stays on track and make sure they get all the shots. Second AD is responsible to report directly to the first AD. Depending on how the first and second AD work, usually the second AD will do call sheets. They also do all the contracts between talent, and they'll also assist with things like parking and set logistics in general. One other position I left out for Grip It Electric is Sometimes they'll have Best Boy Grip and Best Boy Electric if they have like grips and then electricians, but some shoots are smaller than others, so sometimes they might just have a gaffer and then a key grip. It really just depends on budget and how big the lighting setups are. Here's something to keep in mind. It's production's goal to always provide other departments with as much information as possible about what's going to happen. That way, everyone is prepared. Whenever you receive large amounts of information from production, make sure you read it. Everything. Even if you think it's unnecessary, still read it. It can be something like the call sheet email. Even if your first instinct is to beeline to the back of the call sheet and check your individual call time or the location address, you still want to read the entire call sheet and the original email. If you ask for information that's already been provided, then it's a terrible look because you weren't being proactive to find the information yourself. It's important to read everything that's handed to you. Imagine if you were a coordinator typing an email about where to get an important hard drive for set, and a PA comes up to you and asks for a phone number that they could have just got off the call sheet. So next time you need something, just make sure you exhaust all your resources before asking for it. If you're a set PA, one of your main responsibilities is assisting in company moves. Now, there are some key differences between a scene change and a company move. A scene change, you're just simply moving to possibly another room or another spot on the location. You still might be moving things, but you're not moving as far. Things like Crafty or Video Village generally shouldn't need to move depending on how it was placed, but maybe camera is too far from Video Village, so it might need to move for better signal or so the cables can reach. So then you could assist camera in moving Village, like the chairs, the tent, the coolers, then a trash sweep to pick up any coffee cups or other trash the client might have left. And then you see how quickly it turns into a multi-person task. As a PA, it's your moment to strike, since time is valuable. However, a company move might be completely changing a shoot location. In this case, you're going to need to get with your production coordinator and production manager for a plan of action on what needs to happen. Here's one way you can help your coordinator or PM. At the top of the day, you'll know that there's a company move for that day. First, you want to ask who's in charge of the shoot schedule what time the company move will happen. That might be the first AD or the production coordinator, depending on the show. As you get closer, maybe get an updated time. Start talking to your department about plans for moving things like Crafty, catering, production office, vans, trucks, and anything else that must go. You can start pre-wrapping things as you get closer to that time. Then when you have to leave, you have less to do. Plus, your boss will love you for that too. Any way that you can be proactive in both company moves and wrapping shows that you can be proactive, which will get you hired again. I hope this podcast has been helpful to you guys and that maybe you're able to learn something from my own experience. And make sure to subscribe for more content like this in the future.